Hello everybody, welcome back. Another week, and we've finally reached the last section in the book, which is Persuasive Text, Unit 8, that's page 243. Persuasive Texts. So unit outcome, to page 243. By the end of this unit, you should be able to listen for supporting evidence. Now, hopefully, we're gonna aim towards actually understanding what supporting evidence actually is, rather than just simply taking out information, because there's a very big difference between information and real evidence, and that's becoming more and more apparent as we go along.
You are saying that the discourse of Islam is something that is wrong, something that should not be allowed, something that you object to. Yeah, go for it.
Is it not true that to have a different opinion isn't the same as telling other people that they shouldn't have or they can't have that opinion?
Absolutely not. No.
Read and understand an exposition, advertisement, a discussion, and a product review. So we will have a look at those things. We'll have a look at how adverts work, how they try and trick you into forming an emotional connection rather than an intellectual one. And that's true of all things in our current society, where everything has an emotional context and very little has an intellectual one.
Who would buy such crappy, useless junk?
We will look at some examples of that and how we've dumbed ourselves down as a society, how we've become dumber and dumber to the point where we are generally, you especially, are less intelligent than your great-grandparents. You're simply not educated to the same standard as we used to be, to the point where even our brains are shrinking considerably, globally. Our brain sizes are getting way, way smaller, and it's very alarming. We're getting dumber as a species. Over the last 3,000 years, we've seen a very large shift in brain capacity in the negative. Scientists are postulating that this could be for several different reasons, but we really don't know. And it begs the question, where will we be in the next 3,000 years? So the common science fiction idea is that within a few thousand years we'll all be in flying cars. But realistically, it more or less looks like we're just going to be back in mud huts if we don't sort ourselves out.
Society may have crumbled, but our decency hasn't.
Use grammatical features associated with persuasive texts. Use emotive language and appeal to the audience. Now, we will go over that. Emotive language is something that's becoming more common as we go along, in a negative way. We don't want appeals to your emotion. We want appeals to your intelligence.
I feel like I've got through my early 30s without almost luckily, when I look at what my friends have to deal with their children, I almost feel a little bit blessed. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that it starts to get pretty lonesome in life after 45 if you don't have a family, you know, and so it's easy to consider the utility of an intense career, and like you have a very high quality career too, you know, that's something that marks you out from let's say, more typical people.
When we're appealing to somebody emotionally, we're shutting down intellectual discourse, and that's very dangerous, and that's exactly what the media is pushing us towards. The current situation, I mean, we've just got through this pandemic that was entirely emotional. There was no intellectual basis for anything that happened. It was entirely done emotionally. We had politicians guiding it instead of scientists, and that's extremely dangerous. And now they're literally saying on the news, you've got 6 months, and then it's going to be climate change. Then we're going to be dealing with that. That's going to be terrible. We're going to have famines. We're going to have famines coming very soon, world food shortages, and interest rates are going to go through the roof, to the moon. They've actually said to the moon, which means inflation is going to go skyward. Prices are going to fly through the ceiling. But we're hearing that this is going to happen. We're being told by world leaders there's going to be a famine, there's going to be terrible financial losses. What we're not hearing is, to avoid financial losses and to avoid a famine, we're doing this. Nobody is saying we are doing this to prevent this from getting worse. All they're doing is saying prepare for it, it's coming and there's nothing we can do. Well, the world leaders' job is to prevent these things from happening. If your leaders can't prevent a food shortage and their people are going to starve, they are not leaders at all. So we're seeing this level of corruption all around the world, and we're seeing it because we've been taught to accept an emotional argument instead of an intellectual one. So we see this thing and we think, oh, we must do something about it. And it's an old political gamble. It's a gambit, rather. It's the way it's been for a very long time. It's very negative to the human condition. We saw it in England years ago, and it's just getting worse and worse, where it's the old political argument. The idea is, it's called the frog theory. If you put a frog in boiling water, it'll jump out, but if you put a frog in cold water, it'll sit in there and let you boil it to death, because it slowly adjusts. And it's the same thing with you. They slowly ramp it up. They know that if they suddenly said, you know what, we're going to bring in communism and we'll take away all your property and you'll have no freedom, everybody would rebel. But if they take it away a little bit at a time and say it's for your own good, nobody rebels. We put up with it. In fact, in America, we saw the opposite of that. America, a country based on the foundation of the premise that a society that would give up freedom for security deserves neither. And I agree with that. Anybody that wants security and gives up their freedom for it is not a person that's worth anything. They're not. So America have gone the exact opposite way of that. They gave up all of their freedoms for security all the way through the pandemic. Some states didn't. Florida didn't. Kentucky didn't. There's a few other states that didn't. And they pushed liberty and freedom. And they were vilified by the media. The media said they were terrible people. And then when we actually look at it, their pandemic results were way, way better than the states that went crazy over it. So, you know, then almost no deaths in Florida. Crazy, crazy, crazy stories. And that's because we're thinking emotionally. The trick is we raise crime. People say, well, the government must do something about the crime. We raise crime by reducing the economic flow into the lowest achieving neighbourhoods. So those people turn to crime. So we raise crime levels, then the public demands that something's done about the crime. So we say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you more police. And they say, brilliant, we want more police. So in the end, you're getting more restrictions on your own behaviour because the government have done something to make your world a worse place. And then they're giving you the solution. And that's how it works. They create the problem, then they offer you a solution. Another trick that they use is to say something terrible's coming, something awful, and then you panic. And then they say, you know what, we'll give you something not as bad. And then you feel like you've had a victory. We saw this with petrol prices in the UK, and I'm going back 15 years. UK, as England, has always been a very expensive place to live. And they raised petrol prices so far that we got riots because people can't afford it. And of course, we're not just talking about you filling up your motorcycle or your car. We're talking about delivery companies, which end up going to be pushing up retail store prices. So everything was going up in price because of the price of tax on fuel. The government knew that this was unsustainable, so they brought the tax rates down. Everybody called it a victory. But what they wanted to charge an extra 50 cents. So what they did is they charged $1, and then everybody protested about the dollar, so they accepted the 50 cents. But if they'd have put up 50 cents, nobody would have accepted that either. But we felt like it was a victory, so we got tricked into accepting the lesser of two evils. And this is how it all works. It's all a scam. Debate issues. So we can look at some issues. We can look at the various issues going on today. Now they're going to be very out of date in here, obviously. This is 20 years old. Most of the issues we face today, I mean, we've got the issues of climate change. Now, climate change is an interesting one. Because
one thing is by making alarming predictions, offering solutions to our problems. And if they didn't do that, if Noam Chomsky had just kept on stating in linguistics, neither of us probably would have ever heard of Noam Chomsky. He would have been just as famous around the world among linguists, but nobody else would have heard of him.
What do you make of global warming?
I think it's a classic example of the need for crusades. Now, many people are shocked by these emails. I'm not at all shocked by them. I read the original UN study years ago, and I was just curious as to how they were going to deal with the question that the temperatures went up first, and then there was the increase in carbon dioxide.
Right. Because
you can't say that A causes B if B happened first.
In the 80s, they were calling it global warming, and they were saying that we're all going to be drowning. There were movies like Waterworld showing the world covered in water and showing everybody was now in a dystopian future. There was no water to drink, oddly enough, but everyone was dying, and it was disgusting, and everything was appalling. And we were told we were all going to die. Then, 40 years later, never happened. Nothing happened. There was no climate change. And now they're saying, oh, no, now there's climate change. We were wrong in the 80s, but now it's coming, and it's all based on flawed studies that are being used for political gain. And it's mostly about the money. No one would debate, I would think, intellectually, that we are doing some damage to the planet. We are. I mean, we are doing some damage. And I'm not talking about we as in you and I. BP, the petrol company, British Petroleum, made a huge spill, and they were blamed. They corrupted the environment horribly, and they were blamed for the destruction that they caused. And they came up with the idea of carbon footprints to blame everybody else. Well, everybody's got a carbon footprint. You're actually doing damage to the environment, not us. And everyone's bought into it. And we forget that this was actually a scam by a giant corporation who were too cheap to have proper safety measures in place. And this is what actually happened. So now the idea of a carbon footprint was jumped on by the politicals, and they said, yeah, we can now blame every individual for having a carbon footprint. So you're actually now part of the problem by being alive. And again, we've got world leaders who never managed the corporations and never sort of made them reel it in so that they cause less environmental damage. So we are damaging our environment. That's probably not open to debate. But to the degree that we're destroying the planet, I would argue that intellectually, because there is no evidence of it. We don't see any evidence. Barack Obama, who is a piece of crap, an absolute piece of filth, has recently been buying up beachside property. You know, and this is a man who's saying, oh, climate change is coming, the oceans are going to be going up several meters, we're all going to be drowning, and he's buying up land on the edge of the water. So that's nonsense. He knows the truth. The truth is that the environment doesn't change like this. It doesn't change 1 degree at a time. It changes hugely in massive sweeps, usually when some cataclysmic event happens, but Earth is pretty stable. We see more climate change from solar peaks than we do from the damage we're doing to the planet. And no one's saying we shouldn't clean it up. But COVID proved, again, the evidence was all around us, COVID caused environmental cleanups. In parts of Europe, rivers that were black started running clear when there were fewer people dropping rubbish in them. And it was as simple as that. When everybody was locked down and people simply weren't consuming anymore, the environment suddenly recovered within the space of a few months. So we've got this evidence, but it's ignored. It's swept under the carpet because it doesn't have the financial clout that they want it to have. So we're going to debate issues like climate change. We have to look at how debates are now managed. So an intellectual debate where we have two people discussing something intellectually, those days are gone.
We admire your huge trophy, by the way. That's ridiculous. But I'm going to ask you first. We'll start with you, Amina. What was the topic, first of all?
The topic was restricting presidential war powers authority.
They say the nigga's always already queer. That's exactly the point. It means that the impact is not, that is an impact turn to the that it is a case turn to the affirmative, because we are saying that queer bodies are not able to survive. That it necessarily means that the body of the nigga is not able to survive.
We got the topic in about July, and we started doing our research then.
When the nigga sees these pains and suffering that he can only envision himself, that he does not see another nigga that he can feel sympathy for or embrace, but rather that otherness gets obliterated.
And this is a problem. We have these emotional debates where these sort of people who just scream at the top of their voice and make no sense are lauded as heroes, where the actual people who make sense are now called Nazis or whatever. They're attacked personally. Whenever you see somebody make a personal attack, you know a lie is happening.
He's a terrible person.
We had Donald Trump saying climate change isn't a serious problem, it's a scam. And then everyone said, he's a terrible person, he's a terrible person, he's evil, he's disrespectful to women. It was a personal attack on him. Nobody tried to debate what he was saying. That's a problem. Then you know that there's something going on. When they're attacking him as a person and not the words he's saying, then you know that a lie is being perpetrated and something very untrue is happening. It's like the Nazis in World War II. Everyone says, oh, Hitler was evil. But we never say, what did Hitler do that was wrong? We never discuss what he did that was wrong. We just say he was an evil person, that's why he did these things. But no one ever takes apart the actions that they did and the reasons why those things were done. Nobody debates what was good about the Nazi Party. Nobody accepts that there was good things that they did, and there was. Nobody's pure evil. So there's a problem there when we're making these personal attacks, because it's blinding us to the positive and the negative. We're taking the whole thing completely out of context. Nobody is inherently evil. Adolf Hitler didn't wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to be the most evil man in history. How can I do that? Well, let's kill 6 million Jews. Nobody does that. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, oh, these people over here, they look pretty innocent. I think I'm going to burn them all. No one does that. There's always a reason for your actions, and we all believe ourselves to be the heroes. We all have a reason for what we're doing. Even a criminal believes that his actions are justified. He has a right to what he's taking. Everybody believes that they are in the correct mode of behaviour. Formulate questions to gather points of view. Work out how to actually talk to people to get the truth, and write a review and a discussion. We'll probably do something like that. I would like to arrange a debate, and if we're all back, we may do that. We may have a proper debate. And we'll talk about some of the issues. We've got climate change, we've got the woke agenda.
The left destroyed traditional mores with regard to relations between the sexes. The original idea was that men were supposed to act with honor and chivalry in protecting women, and women were supposed to look for example, relationships just as men were. Sexual activity was supposed to be confined, this was at least the ideal, was supposed to be confined to committed relationships, particularly marriage. Not everybody lived up to that, but a huge number of people did. When you don't teach men to protect women, you get men who will victimize women. And when you don't teach women that they ought to cherish men who are responsible and good, all you end up doing is incentivizing bad male behavior.
The woke agenda is probably one of the darkest moments in recent human history. I've heard arguments that it came around in the 80s as a way of diverting attention from banking irregularities, so where the bankers were stealing money from us and getting caught doing it. Woke business became a new thing to divert attention. And I do agree that woke is a deliberate diversion. It's a diversionary tactic. But also there's been a deliberate movement to destabilize the West. The West is being systematically taken apart by the same people. I can't say who, because this YouTube video would be banned. I would not be allowed to say this on a YouTube video. But one group is behind feminism, Black Lives Matter, all of these different things, woke agenda, critical race theory, all of it is funded by the same people. And those people have an agenda towards removing the West, because those people want to take over the world. They see a certain racial group as being the only barrier to them having control over the world. They see themselves as better than everybody else, and once the Westerners are removed, they can make slaves out of everybody else. And that's what we see all around the world, and that's the political landscape, and that's why people like me are pretty aggressively arguing against it. I write books about this stuff, and we talk about it online, and we try to raise awareness, because this is going to take a lot of people to stop this. The world I would like to see is everybody educated to the absolute peak of their abilities, and then given free carte blanche to go away and do your thing. Because I believe that humans are inherently good, and I believe that we would all see a better functional society if we could remove all of the things that hold us back. And then all of us could work together, and we'd have a renaissance where everybody just does what they do. Look at YouTube. YouTube is a fantastic example of what could be achieved, because you've got these people making these YouTube videos to an amazingly high standard, often for no money. Most YouTube videos never make a single dollar. I have several channels, they don't make any money, and we make videos on there to the best of our ability to publicize our books, which we don't make money from either, really. I mean, we make a little bit, but not a lot. And we're not doing it necessarily for the money, we're doing it because we believe in what we're doing. And you see this all around YouTube. You see these people producing excellent quality work that not just rivals the mainstream TV, but is often better, quite a large degree better. And there's no money involved. And it's done just purely for the love of it. And we see this all through people's hobbies and interests. Can you imagine a world where, you know, if you're very good at something and really have a passion to do it, you're simply allowed to do it? And that's what we're trying to reach for, and that's what we should be trying to reach for as a society. So what we're going to be talking about this month is this persuasive writing. So in persuasive writing, the writer tries to persuade the reader or listener to accept his or her opinion or to act in a certain way. And that's true. Now, an opinion, straight away, we need to validate what this word means. Now, an opinion is a belief that is held. That means it is not a fact. Now, you have to understand that straight away. When people talk about genders, and this is a common thing at the moment, in America, they don't know what men are and what women are. And that's an opinion, because the scientific fact is there are men and women. That is the scientific fact. Anyone that doesn't buy into that is an opinion, because they're basing their beliefs on something that is patently unsupported by fact. And this has been a long time coming. In the 60s, 1965, there was an appalling event in American science where a pair of twin boys were raised as a boy and a girl. It started out with one of them suffered a botched circumcision, and his entire genitals were removed, and then he was raised as a girl and the other one was raised as a boy, and he kept claiming, no, I'm a boy, no, I'm a boy, and his parents kept saying to him, no, you're a girl, you don't have a penis. And this went on until he was 8 years old. He kept saying, no, I'm a boy, I am a boy, I don't know what's going on here. And eventually it was revealed that it wasn't a botched circumcision at all, it was a scientific experiment to find out if you could raise somebody as a female by removing their genitals. It was a scientist backed this. That's horrific. That's absolutely horrific. So without this child's consent, they tried to turn him into a biological female, which is impossible. You can't actually do that. So they removed his genitals. He later killed himself. He committed suicide. And this has been going on for a long time. The idea that gender is nurture, not nature. So in other words, it's something that you're taught rather than something that is inherent to our existence. It's built into us biologically, which it absolutely is. We know this. Science has proved this time and time again. There is no way to switch genders. It's part of who you are at an absolutely fundamental level. We are our gender. It's a huge part of our identity.
Are you a boy or a girl?
And to lie about that is to lie to ourselves. And this happened in 1965. So even then, they were planning this whole idea of removing the concept of gender from society. Appalling. But anything less is an opinion. And in persuasive measures, we're trying to persuade somebody else to swallow our opinion. The methods that we do is we use authority very often. We use the idea that this person is smarter than us, or better than us, or more privileged than us, or richer than us, which is why so many people follow the likes of Musk, Elon Musk. Everybody buys into that crap. Elon Musk is not a good person. He's not. He made billions off of COVID, billions, way more than he spent buying Twitter. A lot of people have said he should have saved the world. $43 billion. He could have ended world hunger. Yeah, he could. For $43 billion, he could have ended world hunger forever, but chose not to. Chose instead to buy Twitter. And a lot of people say he's an evil man because of that. But at the same time, the American government spent trillions, and no one knows where that money went. And that's horrific, because that's our money. That's taxpayers' money. I know we're not Americans, but unfortunately, the global economy is pivoted around America. So one way or another, your money's going there. So that's pretty appalling. And that's what we see. We see things like authority guiding people to buy into their opinion. We use other methods to drive our opinion forwards. But remember that an opinion is always a belief that's held without the support of facts. To produce an effective piece of persuasive writing, the writer needs to use his or her vocabulary effectively and to understand the subject matter well. The writer must also know who the target audience is and how to appeal to the audience's emotions. And this is where we see it start to unravel. So you need to be able to use your vocabulary effectively. Now, a lot of people in this grade especially, and you are the worst grade I've ever taught, you are exceptionally out of touch. Your reading and writing standard is way, way below average. When I'm setting tests, I am taking that into account. And when I see you go through tests and quizzes, I know you're cheating because the scores are artificially way too high. So I know the online quizzes and tests don't work, but I don't care about that because I don't believe in that sort of measurement. When I get you to write an attendance answer, the sentence, those of you that even bother doing it, usually it's just word salad. There's poor grammar, horrendous vocabulary, misused words. Nobody is ever going to listen to you if you completely adopt this measure. If you write like this and you speak like this, nobody's going to take you seriously, especially in a debate. If you're trying to get your message across and you can't do it eloquently, if you can't do it using words that make you sound intelligent and use them correctly, then everyone's going to think you're a fool and nobody has any interest in you. And maybe your career isn't going to involve convincing people that you're right about certain subjects. Maybe you're not going to be a politician or a lawyer or a scientist. Maybe you're going to be a salesman. But no one's going to buy what you're selling if they don't trust you. If you don't sound competent, then people aren't going to trust you, they're not going to buy your product, they're not going to take you seriously. And that's where you are. And that's why for a whole year I've been trying to drive this message home that you are behind, you need to come into school, and you volunteered not to, most of you. You need to come in and you need to raise your standard. Instead of like, what I see is you sitting back and trying to do the least amount possible. You should be demanding that you do more than I give you because you're not meeting the standard. And I don't see that. So no one's going to take you seriously. That's absolutely correct. I hope you don't become a generation of minimum wage waiters and waitresses. But that's where you're going if you don't wake up to yourselves. The writer must understand the subject matter well, and that means go beyond. We recently touched on gerunds, which is a complex subject with several layers because it's been changed. The use of gerunds has been very seriously changed in modern times, and they're used incorrectly as well as mixed up with various different versions of the same thing. So it's a complex issue. To be able to teach it or to understand it, you've got to dig deep. You've got to understand all the different layers, where it comes from, how it's changed, and why we use them. It goes into a deeper state. And that's what you have to do if you want to discuss something. If you want to talk about the woke agenda, you've got to understand all the different levels that led us here, what it is, what these people believe, and what is actually driving this kind of political movement. You've got to do all of those things. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to debate it. And we see things like where, well, you see it all over YouTube on the news, where these woke people are always destroyed in the middle of their arguments. And that's why they're so scared of people like Elon Musk taking over Twitter, because they've had a free forum where they've been allowed to talk without being questioned. Now, with free speech, they are going to be questioned and they don't have the answers. They know this. People buying into woke are trying to extend their power. They have suddenly got this power for nothing. And these are weak people. They're the weakest people. They're looking for something that they didn't earn, and now they're being given these privileges in society that suddenly they're important. They just dye their hair, put on some weight, call myself beautiful. I can be whatever I want to be. And we all know that's nonsense. And now they're going to be debated fairly and they won't be able to deal with it, and they're very scared about it. And that's why we see this thing, why woke never wins an argument, and very rarely do they actually go up against intelligent debaters. Then we come to appeal to the audience's emotions. Again, I very much disagree with this as a way of debating, because, well, you've got two minds. There are two brains inside you fighting for dominance. We have the intellectual, human side of you that knows right from wrong and can work it all out. And then we have the emotional side. And those two things don't get along. So basically, at the back of your brain, you've got the lizard brain, which is your animalistic instincts, which is your emotions, and that will drive you to make bad choices. You've got the intellectual side that drives you towards good choices. Most people are driven by the intellectual, by the emotional, and ignore the intellectual completely. The emotional side is why I have several large motorcycles that I almost never drive. And the intellectual side is why I borrow my wife's cheap scooter for work every day, because it's just more efficient, it's cheaper to run, it just doesn't matter. But the bikes I have, I love, but they're very much an emotional choice. They are not a practical choice. We don't always make practical choices. We very rarely make practical choices. I'm sure all of you do the same thing. And this is why we're talked into buying unhealthy food instead of healthy food. This is why we have relationships with, well, if we can, with beautiful people rather than people who are actually interesting to spend time with. This is why we are rather go to social media instead of forming real relationship bonds. The emotional one is cheap and easy to feed, but it doesn't have any long-lasting context. Intellectual is the way forward. So the writer has to lead the audience to agree with his/her views by showing that the information has been interpreted in a logical way. The writer or speaker may also appeal to the audience's emotions to get them to agree with him or her. So you have to lead them into your opinion, show them how you formed your opinions and the evidence that your opinion is based on. Now, I was told once, reason is a flawed tool, and it's absolutely true. I had to think about that for a while. A flawed tool. How can reason be a flawed tool? And of course it is. When you start to work out, you can make reasoned assumptions. You can draw conclusions by using reasoning. But reasoning relies on you having all of the information. We never have all the information. Think of it like a dice. When we look at a dice, it's only possible for a human being to see a dice and to see maximum 3 sides. But we know there are 6. So there's half the debate is always invisible to us unless we see it in a mirror. So unless you do your research and get around the other side of the argument, you're only going to see half of it. So your information could be based on the absolute best science possible, but you haven't got all the answers.
Am I stupid?
So it's still a flawed opinion. So part of it is showing that your opinion is based on the best information and makes the most sense. And you've got to really say it's correct, and here's why it's correct. You've got to show that it's correct and that your opponents are wrong, that they've drawn the wrong conclusions or they haven't drawn any conclusions at all. By appealing to the emotions. I very, very strongly disagree with that. But yeah, that's how it's working today. The followings are the objectives of different types of persuasive text. Advertisements. So advertising is to offer information to attract customers or supporters. Advertisements don't really have information in them anymore because you can't. You can't advertise Coca-Cola by talking about what's in it. And you never do. You never say it's full of sugar and chemicals and doesn't belong in a human body. You have to do an emotional appeal for it. And you see this with all things. You see drinks are always pretty people holding up the can, relating some nonsense event to the product, and we never talk about what's in it. You never see that. We see it sometimes with shampoo adverts. This contains a pH balance of 0. Well, what does that even mean? It sounds scientific, but what does it mean? And it doesn't mean anything that's related to this in any way, so it's just pseudoscience. It's just word salad that means nothing. Reviews, to offer an informed opinion. So when we do a review of something, we're trying to give our opinion based on our experience. But they're very, very biased because we don't know who the person is, but they are obviously coming at it from their own personal viewpoint. Most people don't bother dropping a review unless they've had either a very good or very bad experience.
This is terrible.
In terms of sales, it's a truism that if you give somebody bad service, they'll tell 10 to 15 people. If they have a good service, they may tell 1. And that's a fact. So if you go to a car wash and it's excellent, you're not going to go home and say, oh my God, they did a fantastic job. You might mention that to somebody who says, oh, I'm going to go and get my car washed. Oh, I went to a place that was really good. You might do that. But if you have a bad service, that's an anecdote to tell all of your friends. And that's how it works. So reviews tend to be predominantly bad because most people talk about bad experiences. A challenge to argue against the point of view. So if somebody's offended you in some way, which is good, offence is good, you might want to argue against it, or a discussion to discuss both sides of an argument. I would like for that to be with the end of coming to a conclusion. So I do this with my friend Seth a lot. He's in Japan. We were at school together. We grew up together. And we write together now. And often we'll have these little discussions where we'll be writing a story and he'll come at it his way, I'll come at it my way, and we'll argue it out in a very friendly way. We won't get personal. I have one set of beliefs, he'll have another, and we'll debate over which one is correct. And ultimately, of course, neither of us are. We're looking at it with our own personal perspectives, and we'll always agree that there is some merit to both sides of the argument. Very often, we'll argue all day on a particular subject, and then when we really analyse it properly, we work out that we've basically been saying the same thing. The following are some types of persuasive writing. Newspaper editorials. And again, this is dangerous. So a newspaper is meant to give news, unbiased, as you've seen through the other sections of the book, unbiased, honest, proved opinions. Now, an editorial is none of that. An editorial is written by an editor or a journalist, and it's just an opinion piece. But to put that in with the truth sways people. It makes them believe, well, we get into a pattern of behaviour where you're so used to accepting something that you accept something nonsense. So if I can get you in a shop to look at this mobile phone, I'll say, this is the latest mobile phone. It just came out today. Yes, can't argue with that. It's true. And it comes in a range of colours that are probably the best for the consumer, black, grey, white. Okay, comes in black, grey, white. Yes. It's got the latest chip, it's faster than any of the other phones. Yes. It is the best phone for you. Yes. Because you're so used to saying yes, you'll say yes again. Now in newspapers, when we keep giving supposedly true stories, then we have the editorial. You're so used to accepting that it's true that you accept the editorial. So it's a great way of convincing the audience. And again, when we do debates, fact, 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 opinion. People will accept your opinion. Essays, advertisements, obviously, political speeches, don't even get me started, and reviews. In order to appeal to the audience, writers and speakers may focus on the following: needs for safety and security. And this is what we've seen. We've seen all around the world huge social problems caused by the pandemic and the terrible way it was handled. And it was handled appallingly in almost every country in the world. It was handled terribly. Europe, for instance, had a pandemic plan. They had a plan for dealing with pandemics. And it was completely organised, and it was organised by scientists. No lockdowns, no masks, none of the isolation plan, none of these things were involved because they don't work. None of those things worked. In England, it was lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. It crippled the economy. It made people suicidally depressed. The suicide rate is higher than the deaths from COVID, even when hospitals were recording it incorrectly. So this idea that you have to be safe, you have to have security, is a trick. And it works by convincing people, you're going to die. When COVID first came out, one of my ex-girlfriends phoned me and said, I'm going to die. I smoke, I've got problems with my lungs already, I'll probably die, I wanted to say goodbye. She was so scared. And this is what we see. People they'll give up anything for safety and security, but once you've given it up, you never get it back, and you never get safety and security. Lockdowns didn't make anybody safer. Sense of self-importance. We see this in advertising a lot. Everybody wants to feel important. Well, I can make you feel important if you buy my product. Only the very finest people have this product. Do you want to be one of them? Makes you feel better about yourself. Desire to be liked or loved. Again, my product is the one that everybody drinks. Do you want to be like everybody else? Do you want to fit in? Do you want to be the same as these great people here? Join us. That's how it works. needs to belong and fit in with others. I think it's the same thing. Desire for excitement and fun. Again, we see this with motorcycles and stuff like that. This is fun. You know, you're bored. I saw a thing in a Sony catalogue once. Your life is boring. Your life is terrible. It said this unless you buy this product, and then your life will be fun and exciting. It was only a DVD player. It was ridiculous. So yeah, you're bored. Buy this. Desire to be rich. I'll sell you this book and it will make you rich. This book will tell you how I got rich. We see this a lot. As a writer, I see this a lot. This book tells you how to be rich. And then you read it and it says, I wrote a book and sold it to idiots. Yeah. Damn it. And that's the trick. That's the scam. We see this a lot. There's a little Facebook forum. I think it's 20 to 50 it's called. So you write 20 books and you get to $50,000. 20 books. So everybody doing it is trying to write this trash. They're just writing absolute trash. And the plan is to show them how to market it. And it's an extremely complicated plan. One woman said she was succeeding. She said, I made $18,000 this month. I went, oh, okay, that's pretty impressive. How did you do it? She spent $15,000 on advertising. So, okay, she still made $3,000. It's pretty impressive. But she didn't make $18,000. She invested $15,000. And this is how the plan works. And when you get right down to it, I couldn't make sense of the plan. And then I looked into it a bit more deeply, and of course, the plan is run by a man who sells 20 books that teach you how to do it. So that's how he did it. That's how he got 20 books to $50,000. He tricked people into buying his crappy books. Desire for success. Yeah, you want to be successful, you need to have this product. This product will help you. Whether it be a book or a self-help guide or a watch that helps you to feel like you've accomplished something. Desire to feel free and independent. Motorcycles are terrible for this. There was an advert for a motorcycle, can't remember what one, where it's a man who just walks out of his job, throws his laptop on the floor, throws his bag, takes off his tie, throws it, gets on his motorbike and rides off, and then the city melts away and he's in the countryside and he's just smiling. Freedom. Of course it's not, because he's got to go back to work. So, and the desire to help others. We see this a lot with charities. Again, they appeal to your emotions, your sense of doing the right thing, your morality, and they try and get you to help others by giving your money. Saw this horrible story from America where this young boy, about 8 years old, started making these, I think they were bracelets. He started making these little bracelets and selling them at school for a few dollars. And he spent months and months doing this to earn enough money to pay off the debts of some of his classmates to the lunch fund. So these kids were getting into debt to buy enough food to eat, and he was selling products to pay their debts. And the news story came and said, oh, isn't this wonderful? And somebody underneath it said, so what you're basically saying is an 8-year-old boy had to do illegal child labour to pay off the debts of other 8-year-old children. This is appalling. This shouldn't be charity. We pay taxes to the American government to feed our children. So why is this happening? And it's absolutely correct. This was appalling. But we accept it because we're told it's a great thing. This child's a little hero. Well, yes, no one's taking away what the child did. It was a great thing that he did, but he shouldn't have had to do it. So, so that's an introduction to how these things work and what they are. Always be careful. If something is appealing to your emotions, it's probably a lie. And if it makes a personal attack on anybody else, it's probably a lie. And if it isn't based on absolute science and fact, it's probably a lie. In fact, if someone's trying to persuade you of anything, it's probably a lie. Nobody is ever going to come around your house, knock on your door and say, the sun is not going to come up tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning there will be no sun. You'd laugh at them. You'd say, you know what, you're an idiot, go away, you're an idiot. Everyone would laugh at that person because then the next morning the sun would come up and they'd carry on doing it, knock on the door. Sun's not coming up. And of course it always does. No one's ever going to do that because we all know the sun's going to come up. We don't try and persuade people that the sun isn't coming up. We try and persuade people about stuff we know is lies. We do. We try and persuade you, no, my bike is better than your bike because I did more thinking about it and I chose a better bike. No, my bike's better because it's faster. No, my bike's better because it uses less petrol. We try and persuade something that isn't true. Okay, you can't argue, my bike is better because it's faster. Well, I like fast. What if you don't? What if a fast bike doesn't make any sense to the other person? Every bike is different, and every person is even more different. There is no better or worse. You can't say this person is better than this person. Better at what? There's no such thing as a better person. There's a person who's better at this, or there's a person who's better at that. But there's no one person that's better than all the other people, because we don't know better at what. We can't judge that. So if someone's trying to persuade you that something is true, it isn't. Nobody persuades you of that. You're never going to see an advert for eating fruit. We all know we should eat fruit. You're going to see adverts for buying products because we know those products are garbage. You're always tried to be persuaded into doing something that doesn't make sense. You're never, ever going to get persuaded into something that you know is true because you already believe in it. That's how it works.
Raise your fist! Raise your fist right now! Raise your fist!